Okay, so I will introduce Theresa Putkey now. Tonight, for the academic and professional experience sharing feature of our March 2012 business meeting, I'm honored to introduce Theresa Putkey, an SJSU ASIS student chapter member, who is tonight's speaker. Theresa's presentation will address how MLIS students are uniquely positioned to do user experience and information architecture work, as well as how students can transition their skills to a less traditional role. Now, to provide a little background information about our speaker. Since 2000, Theresa's experience in the software and web design fields have shown her that content is often used as a salve to fix bigger communication and interaction problems. She moved into information architecture to ensure that companies use their dollars most effectively, plan correctly, and execute the user experience and information architecture phases efficiently. With a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of California, Davis, her focus is on user needs in content management systems such as websites, intranets, and other CMS projects, digital asset management systems, and digital libraries. She is working on her Master's of Library and Information Science at San Jose State University with an expected graduation date of May 2012. Tonight's presentation will last approximately 10 to 15 minutes. After the presentation, Theresa will answer questions in the Q&A session. I will now turn the microphone over to Theresa so that she can share her experience with us.
Hello, everyone. It's somewhat strange to have such a formal introduction, but I'm happy to be here. If you can't hear me, then make a sad smiley face or something. Otherwise, I'll get started. Obviously, my talk is about using your MLIS skills in information architecture. So I'll be talking about what is information architecture and what skills do you learn at San Jose State that you can use in your career. So for my background, a lot of people ask me how I got into information architecture, and it was kind of a roundabout way, as most people get into UX and software design. So I started off as a tech support analyst in a software company, and then I moved into technical writing. And from technical writing, I moved into requirements analysis and requirements writing. And I also started doing software design. This was while I was an employee at a software company, and they were relatively small, so I had an opportunity to do a lot of different roles because they didn't have everyone to fit each niche role. And when I became unhappy as an employee, I went out as an independent on my own. I did that as I did technical writing, and then I moved into information architecture. I thought that was more interesting. And to become an information architect, I simply called myself an information architect, and then I faked it till I made it. So people ask me, you know, what did you have to do to become an information architect? Well, I had to call myself one, put it on my business card, and then try to figure it out as I went along. But with the web, it's very immature, and a lot of companies don't know what they're doing, so I was able to figure it out. And then I thought, well, I can use some more confidence and some more expertise, so I'm going to do my MLIS degree. I had talked to other people in the profession, and they have MLIS degrees, and I liked information, so I decided to do the degree. So what is information architecture? Tonight I'm giving you a very brief overview of what IA is, and there's more resources at the end of this presentation that you'll be able to look at for further information. Basically, what I think IA is helping people organize information so they can find it later. You need to understand who's going to use it, and design information structures for them. And normally this design is coded into a content management system, a digital asset management system, a digital library, an intranet, or a website. So one thing that I like him, understanding who is going to use it and designing for them. People, as librarians, we do this with reference interviews, with designing library programs and services, making it applicable to the people who are using our services. So information architecture is essentially the same thing, but in a corporate environment. Why? Because corporations have tons of information, but they have no idea how to organize it. Or they can organize it, but they can't search for it, browse it, find it. A lot of times when I'm working on taxonomies in corporations, they kind of have an idea of how to create a taxonomy, maybe like a high-level thing, but they always think that their taxonomy has to be hierarchical, that they have to browse through tree structures to find this information, which may not be appropriate for their system, but also they lack confidence in organizing information. So while they might have the subject matter expertise, they don't have the information organization expertise, and that's what we provide. Also, they might have things well organized, but nobody can search on it. Using a search box returns a list of unprioritized results. So using our skills, we can help people implement systems that where results are prioritized, or you can filter through them. If you go to like Zappos or something, you can filter on the taxonomy. You can look at different things that's well organized, and you can find things. So the approach, it's a user-centered design approach. So we need to learn about users. Like I said, just as librarians learn about services that patrons need. In the same way, we learn about, the same way that librarians learn about their patrons is the same way that IAs or UX people learn about their users. So we do surveys and interviewing, focus groups, card sorting, observation. And we also apply our knowledge about information seeking behavior and information retrieval. So we learn about information retrieval, about precision and recall, and we can apply these same skills to helping people find information in a website or a content management system. And after we do all this research, then we kind of get into the content to see what's there and design something new or better, or to improve something that already exists. You need to do a content inventory, and I'm throwing out all of these terms, and you will need to look them up later if you want more information, because this is just a brief overview. But basically you do a content inventory of whatever content you have. You find out what types of content you have. Is it HTML pages, is it PDFs, images, videos, whatever you have. You do card sorting to find out how people would want to organize these different things. Is it by topic, by type, by people who create it, by date. You can create metadata and taxonomies, as well as a sitemap to show the site structure. A lot of the work I've been doing lately is with metadata and taxonomies. That's where my interest lies. And a lot of websites are using websites and content management systems and digital asset management. All of these systems are using metadata and taxonomies to organize their information, because tree hierarchical structures aren't working for people anymore, at least in a corporate environment. You can advise on the search interface. You can design the search interface, whether it's typing something in a box and clicking go, or if it's faceted search. And also, once the search has been implemented, you can make sure that it works correctly, that the precision and recall is actually good. And then you can design wireframes, which are basically just like black and white drawings of where the information should be laid out on a page. And then you can conduct user testing, taking feedback on people's impressions of the taxonomy, of the wireframes, of the visual design or the graphic design. Or you can also test on a live site or maybe like a prototype site to take feedback and then improve the site based on that feedback. And what skills do I use? So, as I said, I did this MLIS to improve my IA skills. Before I started the program, I was very practical about it. I said, this has to be a practical degree, not a theoretical degree. And there has to be classes in here that I can apply directly to my work. And I love this program because SJSU is a totally practical program. It was perfect. So in 240, the information tools and technology, I already knew tons of the stuff, but there was some CSS stuff I didn't. But it was interesting nonetheless. In 244, we learned about search tools, and we got to do an in-depth paper research, and then write a paper. So I did mine on federated search, and that was quite interesting. I interviewed a librarian and a search information architect to find out the different viewpoints on federated search, and now I advise my clients on it because I still have more information than they do. In 247, that was a fantastic class. It was great learning all that classification stuff from her. We talked about taxonomies and controlled vocabularies, faceted classification. It was fantastic. We actually created like 2 or 3 classification schemes. In 248, I know it's not on there, and I wouldn't say that wasn't really that great for information architecture, but it was certainly interesting to understanding the history of classification. In 281, I think that was just like an information science seminar, but I did the one about metadata, and that was really great. I did it at the same time as 247, and the metadata was just more technical about creating metadata, creating crosswalks, how to choose the right metadata scheme, how it's being used in like the XML and W3C. So that's pretty cool. 282, the digital asset management. Did a lot of stuff about taxonomies in there, about image labeling, and how do you classify an image or a video when there's no text. So that skill is really important. Picking out what's important about the thing you're classifying is really important when you're working, well, in any environment, but in a corporate environment, it's important to keep focused on why you're classifying these things. 285, research skills. Well, that was great for like user research or user experience research about how to plan a research project and implement it. I wouldn't say that I ever get to do such a full research project for any of my user experience projects. It's more of like ad hoc and only if I have time. But it was still really good to know how to approach research from a very, I guess, technical and thorough angle. So at least I know when I'm not doing it thoroughly. In 287, we talked about digital libraries, and plenty of corporations have digital libraries. Even if they're not like libraries with books in them, there's still libraries with documents and PDFs and Word, Excel, anything that's important to a corporation. They'll be keeping it in like an intranet or a document management system. A digital library is, I guess, a larger term that incorporates those document management or content management systems. But that was a really good class for learning about user experience and digital libraries and how the digital libraries interact with the physical world and people's information seeking. For 294, I did a taxonomy internship. The way I got it was I just emailed a company that I had met a woman 3 or 4 years prior who owned the company, and I obviously I kept in touch with her a little bit through those 3 or 4 years. And then I emailed her and asked her if she would be interested in the taxonomy internship, and she said she would. She was. So I ended up doing a taxonomy project for the United States Pharmacopoeia in Washington, D.C. These are the people that keep the standard for all of the food and drug additives in the United States, and it was really interesting, and I got to go to Washington, D.C. as well, so they flew me out there. And from that, I've been doing more taxonomy work with really quite interesting stuff. And the last class I took that was most applicable was I took a WISE class on information interaction. So that was interesting. And so the challenges I think MLIS students face is that a lot of the MLIS students I've encountered, a lot of people say, well, I'm taking this degree, I don't know what I want to do with it. But, which is really strange for me, because when I came into the degree, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. So I think the challenge is that MLIS students can lack practical on-the-job experience in corporations. Sometimes, they've been in school for years, or they've just been working, I don't know, doing, different jobs. However, I think, okay, well, let me keep going. Somebody said this to me at a conference last week or 2 weeks ago, that students aren't sure how to speak the language of corporations and adapt their skills. So instead of talking about corporate environment, they'll talk about a library environment. I think you can solve these problems by doing a non-library internship. Or even just replacing the word library with corporation. They're very similar. So anyway, back to doing a non-library internship, you can either find that through the San State, or just find a company that you want to work for and ask them to have you as an intern. That's what I did, and my internship was pretty good, and I did get further work out of it, and certainly more confidence. Also, if you do work in a corporation, the other thing to do is to ask for opportunities within the corporation already. So the resources I have, there's ASIS&T, as we all know, and I think they have an information architecture SIG. There's the IA Institute, which is sometimes confused with ASIS&T, actually, but it's just another organization that runs the IA Summit for ASIS&T. I did my 240 projects on information architecture, so you can get some very basic stuff there. And there's my website, where I put up a lot of blog posts. That's one way to show, that I'm an expert, is that I blog about my job. So there's lots of stuff up there about taxonomy and information architecture and user experience. And if you have any questions, you can certainly contact me. So that's all I have for you right now.
Thank you, Theresa, for your interesting and really fantastic presentation. And now that Theresa has finished speaking, I'd like to ask if anyone has any questions for her. So Lauren asked, what would you say is the most enjoyable and more challenging part of IA? So the most enjoyable part of information architecture for me is the information organization. There's a lot of crossover in the user experience world between user experience and information architecture, interaction design, and content strategy. And it's all really confusing. But I think, for me, information architecture is about information organization and designing a layout that promotes information-seeking techniques in in that layout, that content management system or website. So I love the content inventory, sitemaps,
the taxonomy, metadata, even testing people to see how they interact with the information. I really like that part. It's really interesting to see your ideas tested and see what does and doesn't work. And the more challenging part of information architecture is, a lot of people might say that the most challenging part is getting people to recognize the value of it. But I think that people know that information organization is important. They just don't know what it takes to do that. So it's difficult when you say you've got these users and they need to find information, and somebody comes to me and says, organize it so people can find things. And I say, well, how do they expect to find things? We need to investigate this. And they say, we don't have money for that. We just need to have it well organized. And I have to say, I can't make it. It's not a user-centered design if it comes from my brain. So, so next question is, how do you find users to test the wireframe design of the website? Okay, so finding users, basically that comes from when you're doing the user-centered design process and you're in the investigative stage. I think this is the slide, right? So we learn about what users need. You have to find these people, right? If you're in a corporation doing something internal, then it's employees and managers, and you have to get approval from the managers to talk to the employees, which can be tricky because not all managers want to hear what their employees have to say, and employees are weary of being honest or straightforward because their managers might get the feedback. If you're designing something for an external client, so say you have a widget and you want to sell this widget to other people, then you have to know who your target market is and find people who are willing to participate with you in that testing. And to do that, you could talk to like the marketing department. You could just email a user group. Or if you're in a library, I'm not as familiar with the library side, but if you're in a library, you can approach patrons or figure out a way with the library management to get user feedback.
Thank you for answering the questions, Theresa. I noticed that there's another question in the chat box from Hillary who asks, is IA about creating folders and subfolders, or is it higher level than that?
So folders and subfolders, I would point you towards taxonomy and sitemaps. So sitemaps basically become a navigation for a website. And by navigation, I just mean the choices that are like across the top on the website. If you go to REI, you'll see like cycling or camping or outdoor activities. I don't know. But you're not designing folder structures. You're designing the overall structure of where current and future information can go, and how that's implemented is not really something, like how somebody programs that is not what you do. You give them the structure and then they implement it. Typically, if you're doing this in a DAM or a CMS or a website, things aren't typically stored in folder structures. If you're using like version control software, such as TFS or Perforce, then it is in folder structures, and it's not really an ideal way for people to find information because they need to know where it's stored in the structure. So anyway, like I was saying, I would point you towards taxonomy. You can do a hierarchical taxonomy, or you can do faceted taxonomies, and that's really a better way to classify information in a CMS or a DAM or a website. You can also do sitemaps, which lay out like the high level, it lays out the pages of a website and the navigation for a website. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you for answering these questions, Theresa. Are there any more questions from the audience regarding Theresa's presentation?
I do have to say that if you do have any questions, you can email them to me. And I am trying to do more posts on my blog about introductory topics to IA and UX, so maybe I can answer them as a post.
I had a quick question. I was curious what kind of, well, I mean, I know they have software and so forth for creating wireframes and things like that. Do you find there are particular softwares that are important to be familiar with and know how to work with as an IA person?
Yeah, so the software that is probably most common because it's the least expensive is Microsoft's Visio, V-I-S-I-O. I don't know that many IAs are using it anymore, but I think that non-IAs doing wireframes probably use it a lot. I've heard that PowerPoint is a really good way to learn how to do wireframes without having to purchase anything, and you can build in some interaction with that. I use Axure, A-X-U-R-E, because you can build in interaction into that. There's also for Mac, there's Omnigraffle, but I think that might be a lot of money. So is Azure, but I have a PC, so I bought it. And there are like tools for paper sketching. So I think Google might have in the Google Docs, they might allow you to make forms or some kind of diagram. And there's also tons of paper sketching tools like Balsamic and I don't know what else, but I've heard there's tons. So if you can't afford anything, I would suggest Visio or PowerPoint. And if you have a project that you're getting paid for, then I would suggest Omnigraffle or Azure.
Thanks.
Oh, and there's one question. Did you design and create your website? I did the information architecture and the technology on my website, but I am not a visual designer. So nothing that is of any artistic value on my site was done by me. I had another company code it for me, and I had another company do the graphic design. And then for all my blog posts, I picked the pictures from iStock. And the one for Mac was Omnigraffle.
Okay. Theresa, thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any other comments or questions for Theresa? Okay, it seems that we've come to the natural end of our questions here. Theresa, thank you again for presenting tonight at the Academic and Professional Experience Sharing portion of the business meeting. You've done a wonderful job, and we've all learned a lot by listening to you. Your experience with working with information architecture is so interesting, and it's great to see how the skills we've learned in many of our classes can be applied to this alternative career path. So thank you so much for speaking to us more about that. Okay, and now with that, we have covered all of the items on our agenda, and the business meeting is concluded. Thank you everyone for attending tonight. Good night.